If I was Ja Rule, I'd be like, dude, we gotta bankrupt this motherfucker. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Business Blaze. This one, the Fyre Festival fraud, the luxury VIP music festival that ended in fury. That's a lot of Fs. Danny writes these scripts, I read them. This one, and I don't know why, but it really pisses me off. But every time I print something on my computer, it wants to print it 93% zoom, so you got these giant margins, and every time I have to reset it to 100, this time I forgot. It's kind of annoying. The text is really small. Not every music festival in history has gone exactly according to plan. Here in the UK, one of our biggest and most famous annual music festivals is held at Glastonbury, where hundreds of thousands of crusty revelers and hipsters brave the British elements and set up camp on Worthy Farm in Somerset to enjoy a long weekend of big-name acts and dodgy disco biscuits. What's a dodgy disco biscuit? Is this one of those things where everyone, I'll mention I don't know something in the comments and be like, sorry, but you're so stupid, how have you never heard of this? And I'd be like, I don't know, because I haven't heard of everything. Just because you've heard of it doesn't mean everyone has. You knob. The ticket price is pretty steep, although for decades many of the more ingenious thrill seekers found that they could avoid shelling out loads of money by discreetly hopping over the fence and getting in for free. I don't know if I'd describe those people as ingenious, more like cheats, and it's not that creative, is it? This kind of activity has died down quite a bit in more recent years after the festival organisers decided to build a bigger fence. Build that wall! I had a few mates who went to Glastonbury Festival's 35th anniversary in 2005. This was the weekend when Worthy Farm was hit by the worst storm in 15 years. The site was bombarded by torrential rain, the campgrounds and car parks became flooded, the stages were struck by lightning. That sounds pretty awesome. For, like, the spectacle. I mean, Chris Martin probably wouldn't appreciate just getting struck by lightning. Maybe his ex-wife could come up with some sort of potion to help him with that. What a piece of shit. The tents and toilets were blowing all over the place, and the whole farm had turned into a massive 900-acre bloodbath. Yeah, I remember I went camping with school, like I was in the cadets, and we went off to like summer camp, which is where you go stay on a military base, and they didn't have any like barracks for us. So they put like this big white tent with no ground sheet, and they were like, sleep in there, boys. And they had these portable toilets outside. And it was so fucking windy that whole week that the toilets kept blowing over, and then the like septic tanks started to leak everywhere and kind of run towards the tent, and then also people would go to like take one of these things, and everyone would run outside and push them over. I can remember watching the footage on the news and feeling kind of relieved that I hadn't bothered to go myself. But despite this spot of inclement weather, when the clouds finally cleared, the 130,000 attendees stuck on their wellies and got back to having a good time. Good for them. You can't beat the good old British spirit, especially when they forked out that much for a ticket. It's true, like after the First World War trenches, people were like, we can deal with anything. But my feet, Edgar! If anyone gets that reference, thank you for being OG. But even all that doesn't come close to the utter disaster of the Fyre Festival of 2017 in the Bahamas. Often dubbed the worst festival never to ever even happened, I would dispute this just a little bit, as the guests turned up, the food was served, accommodation was provided, and there was even a live performance. I thought none of the bands showed up, but I guess we're gonna get into it. It's just that the festival didn't quite live up to the expectations, and that's putting it very mildly. When your luxury festival ends up with hundreds of stranded attendees, a $26 million fine, and a 6-year prison sentence. I knew the guy went to prison, I didn't realize it was 6 years. You know this isn't going to be destined to be mentioned in the same breath as Woodstock. So how did a VIP festival for elite influencers that charged up to $12,000 a ticket and promised the best in food, art, music and adventure on an exclusive private island in the exotic Bahamas, how did it turn into the kind of show that would have made even the typical grungy Glastonbury fan wrinkle their nose in disgust? The Fyre Festival was the brainchild of 25-year-old self-titled serial entrepreneur Billy McFarland. We're already on a bit of a train wreck because I feel people who label themselves serial entrepreneurs at the age of 25, probably not the best. Born and raised in Melbourne, New Jersey, Billy showed, by the way, speaking of business, how's that merch? Did you buy my merch yet? I don't know, is this the first video? These don't go out in order. This could be the first video where you see me wearing a merch. This is actually today I found out merch. It just arrived in a box the day before I'm recording this video, so I decided to wear it today. I don't really feel comfortable wearing a t-shirt. I'm more of a shirt kind of guy, but I feel like throwing the blazer over this. It either makes me, feel, like I'm not wearing a shirt or like I'm having a midlife crisis. Either way, it's a win. I'm gonna go buy a Porsche. Billy showed conflicting early promise for genius, failure, and shifty business. By the age of 13, young Billy had launched his first web hosting venture, and by his late teens, he had started and sold 3 companies which were quite small companies, so very different from corporate companies. Ongoing joke. One of these companies involved renting server space to dodgy porn sites, and his classmates at the time have since revealed that Billy often trod a fine line between legitimate business and dicey deals. He later dropped out of college during his freshman year to develop an online advertising platform called Spling, which very quickly bit the dust. But it was the sight of his rich friend's American Express Centurion card, or the Black Card. We talked about this before. We did a video all about like credit cards for the elite, which this inspired Billy to get on the right track. I would link to it below, but I know I'm too lazy to bother, so YouTube search it if you want. At this point, I was going to explain how the Black Card is an invitation only. Danny's working this out, isn't he? Is an invitation only credit card for the uber wealthy, and how we've already made a Business Blaze video looking at these prestige cards in more detail, but I suspect Simon has already seized this opportunity, so I won't bother. Billy felt quite envious about his mate's Black Card and knew that he didn't have enough money to qualify for an invitation to get one. Good lord, Billy, your friend is rich, because the minimum spend, we don't really know for sure, but it's expected that in order to get invited to the card, which you have to pay $10,000 to join, you have to be spending $250,000 a year on your existing Amex Platinum, which is extraordinary. I mean, I suppose if you're in like retail or something, so you're buying loads of inventory and selling it, then you could get there. But I think these are more like personal cards. So he did the next best thing. He drummed up the investment to launch an exclusive prestige card of his own. Well, Billy, it's more like, yeah, I could launch my own card. It's like, yeah, it's the Simon's Turbo Ultimate card. It's elite. There's one person who has it. It's me. It's also available on my merch store, the same place you can buy this shirt. The Magnises, don't know about the pronunciation on that, card was launched in 2013, and the card itself was pretty much just a copycat design of the Black Card. For $250 annual fee, members were granted VIP all-day access to Billy's club and bar located in a rented townhouse, along with exclusive access to hotels, restaurants, and art galleries. I admire the hustle there. Like, he's got to be like 20 years old at this point. 2013, when was Fyre Festival? 2017, so 4 years ago. He's 21 when he was launching this. Respect. I respect that. I mean, the $250 annual fee is not really for the elite, is it there, Billy? The whole thing has retrospectively been described as a bit of a scam, as members complained of broken promises and unexpected charges being taken from their shiny metal cards. But the scheme still managed to attract a roster of minor celebrities and investors, including rapper Rick Ross, members of Guns N' Roses and Starship, and a couple of NBA players. Never heard of Starship. Everyone's gonna make it like, the other day I didn't know who Axl Rose was. Apparently he's the lead singer in Guns N' Roses. Why would I know that? Everyone's like, "Sir, I can't believe you don't know who Axl Rose is." And I'm like, from Guns N' Roses, I know the That's not it. Sweet Child of Mine. Oh, sweet child. That's all I know. And not even well. Who cares? Okay, Boomer. Most significantly, Billy's exclusive parties attracted the interest of Grammy-nominated rapper Ja Rule, who went on to join the Magnises company board. Ja Rule had scored a string of chart-topping albums at the turn of the millennium, but he was well past his commercial peak at the time. I do feel like inviting celebrities to be on the board of your company is a bit weird. It'd be like, Simon, he's like a, minor league YouTuber. Let's invite him to be on the board of some random company. I'll just be sitting there like, what the is going on? What is business? Where am I? Billy struck up a close friendship with Ja Rule, and it was the pair of them that cooked up a plan to host a super luxury music festival on the private island of Fyre Cay in the Bahamas. Well, kind of. The problem is that Fyre Cay doesn't actually exist. Although, amazingly, that turned out to be the least of the organizers' problems. I'll come back to that in just a moment. But for now, let's switch over to the perspective of the poor customers who had reportedly paid up to $12,000 for tickets to the biggest party of the decade. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The Fyre Festival had promised an exotic adventure on the boundaries of the impossible. A wealth of top social media influencers had endorsed the event and given the impression that they would be in attendance. Names like Kendall Jenner, she's one of the Kardashians, right? Bella Hadid, no idea who she is, and Hailey Baldwin, no idea who she is. Maybe the daughter of Alec Baldwin? They were posting promotional videos on Instagram and Twitter, encouraging their millions of followers to borrow a bit of money off old daddy and come and mingle with the elite on the edge of paradise. The edge of paradise. A lineup of 33 big-name bands had been announced for the event, which would be held over 2 consecutive weekends in April 2017. Well, I say big names. I'll be honest, I've only heard of the headliners Blink-182, or I think that's what we call them in the UK, but I understand that their actual name is Blink-182. Wait, is it the other way around? I don't know, I don't care, but I do like their music. Quite a fan. This might just be showing my age a bit. There was certainly no sign of Phil Collins or Bananarama. Don't know though. I mean, obviously know Phil Collins. I mean, I don't know his music. Something in the air tonight. Oh Lord! Well, a friend of mine from university is my age, and this was like 15 years ago, was mad into Phil Collins. It's a bit weird being like 18 in like 2005 and being super into Phil Collins. But some of the bands you may have heard of, including Pusha T, Le Youth, Tensnake, and Blondish. Never heard of any of those. I don't like any of their names, and I probably don't like any of their music. I don't remember seeing any of those on Top of the Pops, but it wasn't all about the music. In fact, I suspect that many of the attendees were more excited about chilling out on the beach, drinking tequila, meeting social media celebrities and fashion models, and posting a ton of pictures on Instagram. Sounds f***ing horrible, to be honest. One of those wishes would come true. Which one would it be? Oh, pictures on Instagram. Except of it being shit. The organisers were very keen to promote the Fyre Festival as a complete, luxurious package of a lifetime. The deal included private villas, yachts, limos, free-flowing booze, celebrity chefs, serving up the finest in gourmet food. But the early signs didn't look good as guests arrived in the Bahamas for the first days of the Fyre Festival. Why did they just cancel it? If they knew it was going to be shit, just cancel it. Anyway, we'll find out, I suppose. The travel arrangements hadn't quite lived up to expectations. The guests had been told to drop off their luggage with the festival organisers, after which they would board a private plane. They would be picked up by and by private plane, I mean, yeah, it's privately owned. By Ryanair. Michael O'Leary! God, there are so many old, like, callback jokes in this episode. If you're not getting half of the jokes in this episode, you're not OG. But that's okay. Welcome to Business Blaze. You'll get there. Now go back and watch all of my old videos. Travel arrangements hadn't quite lived up to expectations. The guests had been told to drop off their luggage with the festival organisers after we read that already. They would be picked up by a limo, which would transport them to their private villas, where they would find their luggage waiting for them. The reality was a little different. The guests ended up boarding a regular flight, packed with screaming kids. Upon landing, they were guided towards a car park, where they had their luggage thrown at them from out of a van in complete darkness, after which they were invited to board a rickety old school bus, which would take them to their final destination. As I mentioned, I went to Guatemala once, and all of the public transport there is like old American school buses. So you'll be getting on, I've never been on an American school bus before, you know, the yellow things. And you get on board, and there's no leg room because they're designed for children. And also, you'll be like in like shithole middle of nowhere Guatemala, and there'll be a bus that'll say like Dalton County School District, and you're like, what the is going on? As I mentioned earlier, Fyre Cay doesn't appear on any maps of the Bahamas, largely because there's no such place. Billy McFarland had originally chosen the small privately owned Bahamian island called Norman's Cay as the ideal site for the festival. I guess like Norman's Cay doesn't have the same thing as like Fyre Cay, because Norman sounds like just a really boring dude's name. Like, I feel like if my granddad's name wasn't Keith, it would be Norman. However, Billy ultimately couldn't secure permission to host his festival on the tranquil and remote island which was once famously owned by notorious Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar, so instead he was forced to go with an alternative site. On the island of Great Exuma, there was essentially just an old abandoned resort development. It wasn't remote, it was about as exotic as a bus station, it wasn't private. In fact, there was a thriving population on the island, and it had never been owned by Pablo Escobar. Well, I guess the last one you'd like, unless you're planning on digging up some money or coke. I suppose that'd be pretty cool. I'd just spend my weekends, like, just digging holes looking for Pablo's money. Undeterred, Billy decided, and cocaine. For this channel, you know, my fuel. Undeterred, Billy decided to give it the new name of Fyre Cay in all the marketing material for the festival, and still referred to it as Pablo Escobar's exotic private island, even going so far as to alter promotional maps of the location to make it look as if the abandoned resort development was a private island of itself. You gotta be disappointed when you arrive, like by plane, you take a long bus ride, and at some point you're expecting to get on a boat, and they're just like, no, we're here, and it's like, did I fall asleep or did we not go on a boat? Because if we didn't go on a boat, we're not on an island, are we? As the rickety old school bus brought the first guests to the entirely fictitious Fyre Cay, passengers got their first exciting glimpse of their private villa accommodations, and many of them were already screaming for the bus to take them back. The private villas were in fact rows and rows of small white FEMA tents. Oh no, like from disaster movies. The kind of super basic tents that are often used as emergency shelter in disaster relief operations. To make matters worse, there was no system in place for securing your own tent. The on-site organizers simply shrugged their shoulders and announced that it was every man for himself. Can you imagine just be like, nah, nothing's allocated. It's like fucking prison that you're even allocated a thing. It's more like that prison in that second or third season of Prison Break where they're like in Mexico and the guards just gave up and they're like, yeah, every man for himself. You're like, fuck. But at least if you're a baller, you can have like a TV in prison. A bit of good news was that the organizers provided handy lockers in which to store your own valuables, ensuring that nothing was lost or stolen in the carnival atmosphere of the festival. The bad news is that you needed to bring your own padlock, something which probably wasn't mentioned in the exotic promo videos. Yeah, I saw some of the advertising for this thing. You wouldn't think like, oh, I need to bring a padlock to secure my valuables. You'd be like, aren't we in a luxury villa? We're gonna have keys. And two, from what I understand, everyone there is already super rich. The food was taking a little while to arrive, so in the meantime, the disgruntled guests were being plied with free tequila. When the food did arrive, it wasn't quite the gourmet meal that had been advertised. The festival had promised a unique, authentic island cuisine, local seafood, Bahamian-style sushi, and even a pig roast. Oh god, that sounds good. I'm hungry. What the guests actually received was a foam box containing the world's saddest sandwich, a couple of slices of bread, a couple of slices of cheese, and a dollop of roasty salad. I printed this image because I love the environment. I'm going to put it up there as well. Doesn't look good, does it? It was around the same time the rumors started spreading that not many of the acts booked to this VIP music festival were actually going to show up. Headliners, Blink, had already announced their cancellation the night before in a statement which seemed to hint at their lack of confidence in the festival, so they knew what was up. In fact, none of the 33 bands turned up. Well, that's okay, no one really cared about them anyway. Everyone was there to see the Blink. Many of them had not even agreed to perform at the event in the first place, while others were warned by their teams not to attend after picking up clues that the festival may not be quite as well organized as they'd originally hoped. All was not lost, however. A local band did briefly take to the stage, although by this time the festival had already plunged into chaos. Hundreds of guests, now fueled with tequila, were fighting over tents. The security were getting a bit heavy-handed. There was zero cell phone or internet service, and there were frequent reports of thefts, which is not too surprising as nothing could be put anywhere remotely safe. It's like, yeah, can you imagine you show up expecting some luxury holiday, and you just show up, everyone's drunk, fighting over like FEMA tents, and the food sucks. I think like the food would be the worst part for me. I like my food. Now, to top it all, none of the advertised bands had shown up, and instead the guests were being treated to a performance by a band who had clearly just been dragged out from the nearest pub. It was all starting to get rather Lord of the Flies. Many of the attendees were now keen to escape as soon as possible, but even this wasn't straightforward. The event had been promoted as a cashless festival. When customers bought their tickets, they had been given Fyre bands, which were essentially just digital bracelets on which money could be uploaded. Guests were encouraged to leave their cash and credit cards at home and simply top up their Fyre bands with thousands of dollars, as this was the only currency that would be accepted on the site. Look, if you're leaving the country and you're not taking a card or some emergency cash with you, and you're taking your Fyre band, you're an idiot. That's on you. Partially on you. That's all very well, but it didn't prove particularly useful when panicked guests started trying to order transport or find alternative accommodation, which would have been impossible with even real money as it was peak tourist season and all the local hotels were booked up. As it turns out, the Fyre bands were completely useless anyway as there was no Wi-Fi on site. The Fyre Festival was officially cancelled in the early hours of the next morning, and all the guests were slowly herded back to the airport, where most of them had to endure several more long hours of being locked up in a hot terminal like prisoners until they were eventually allowed to catch a flight home. Last summer, it was like 40 degrees. I was in Paris, it was like 40 degrees. I was in Charles de Gaulle Airport, which is the worst airport in the world, in the developed world, and their air conditioning was on the fritz. It was fucking unbearable. Ja Rule was very quick to throw his former friend Billy under the wheels of the rickety old school bus. In one of the worst apologetic tweets ever posted, he completely distanced himself from any blame, saying, "I truly apologize, but this is not my fault." So why are you apologizing, Ja Rule? It's not your fault. In fairness, the US courts eventually agreed with him. Although he faced a $100 million lawsuit for false promotion, he was cleared of any wrongdoing, with all the blame falling squarely on the shoulders of Billy McFarland. So what exactly had gone wrong? Like everything? Billy's main problem had been a severe underestimation of how much it was all going to cost. He had allegedly been hoping that he could pull off the festival for around $300,000. Dude, good luck with that. But it came a bit of a shock when event producers told him the figure was closer to $50 million. Well, Billy might have been a hustler, but he certainly wasn't an accountant. This naturally meant that Billy might have to cut a few corners on the luxury package that he had been paying hundreds of top social media influencers to promote. Incidentally, the celebrity endorsements on Instagram blew up into a scandal of their own, as none of the names revealed that Billy had paid them to create sponsored posts for the event. Yeah, you gotta be real careful with that. Like any promotion, like paid promotion, you always gotta say like it's sponsored by and put it in the description, because otherwise you're gonna get fined. Or I don't think YouTubers often get fined, it's usually the companies, so they're really hot on us, be like, guys, you gotta say sponsored. Put it in the text. Some sources claim that Kendall Jenner was paid as much as $250,000 to pretend that she was genuinely interested in attending the festival. Bella Hadid later apologized for participating, while Hailey Baldwin revealed that she had donated a payment to charity. The thing is that Billie hadn't raised nearly as much money from selling tickets as everyone had assumed. Although the figure of up to $12,000 had been touted in the press, this was only for the top-range VIP tickets, which it didn't appear anyone had actually bought. If anyone had bought one of these, it's difficult to see what extra perks and benefits they would have received. Maybe a slightly bigger disaster relief tent. The overwhelming majority of the tickets were actually sold at the early bird price of just $500, which is only like 24 times less. This doesn't sound like a bad deal for a luxury trip to a private island in the Bahamas, but this also meant that Billie hadn't raised enough money to actually fund the kind of event he promoted. So it'd be like, yeah, a trip to the Bahamas, except on a private island, except it's not at all in any way. Billie had got himself into a bit of a hole. As the date of the festival loomed closer and it became clear that this really wasn't going to work, the sensible strategy would have been to cancel or postpone. But Billie had got himself into a bit of a hole. He'd taken out a $3 million loan with very harsh short-term repayment plans, and the only possible way that he could pay it back so quickly was to go ahead and host the event, despite the fact that it was a terrible idea. Dude, at this point, I mean, you gotta cancel it and deal with this. Like, at this point, you're $3 million in the hole. I assume you're doing this under a company, so you've got some protection there. Dude, just bankrupt it. You gotta just bankrupt it and then refund what you can. Because, I mean, people are gonna be happier to get like 200 quid back and not end up in this hole than they are to go and then you went to prison. So, yeah. Hindsight's 20/20, I mean, though, but I'd have been like, if I was this dude's like advisor, if I was Ja Rule, I'd be like, dude, we gotta bankrupt this motherfucker. In the meantime, he was encouraging guests to upload thousands of dollars to their Fyre bands to ensure that they wouldn't get caught short, and then using nearly half of the uploaded $2 million to pay off some of the debts that he'd been racking up in his quest to host the biggest party of the decade. Yeah, so this is I feel we're entering criminality. Because it's like, dude, you know it's not gonna work, you know it's a piece of shit, and you're trying to get people to give more money to you. I feel like that's maybe where the crime comes in. Following the fallout from the festival, the lawsuits naturally, other than obviously the false advertising. Following the fallout from the festival, the lawsuits naturally came flooding in thick and fast, and Billy McFarland was ultimately sentenced to 6 years in prison in 2018 for wire fraud and ordered to forfeit $26 million. Wait, where the f*** do you get $26 million from? Maybe from his like secret $250 member black card club. But they'll never dampen his blind optimism. Apparently Billy is spending his time behind bars, planning ahead for the next thrilling Fyre Festival after he's released from jail. Book now to avoid disappointment, or f***ing don't. No one's gonna buy that, Billy-o. This has been Business Blaze. Thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this video, thumbs up, subscribe, but most important of all, you watched to the end and I love you for it. Get some merch. This is actually merch from today, I found out, but I just wanted to wear it today because it came yesterday and I was excited about it. So yeah, do that. It supports Today I Found Out, but whatever, that's cool. That's me too. Thank you for watching. No one's gonna buy that, Billy-o.